Before we begin, the name is placed on the top right side of the screen. The country where she lived, Mariana, was a place with a clear border between the north and south. The south was where the weather was warm and great for farming. The north, which had a poor environment, had mighty military power. At first, the two provinces seemed to cooperate well with each other. However, a large fire broke out. The fire was so large it became historic. The north was simply laid to waste. The problem was what happened afterwards. The people in the north raised their voices against the people of the south who were delaying in giving them the supplies. They asked them if they were out of their minds, reminding them people were dying right here and how they called themselves humans. The South reminded them that they never supplied them help when they were in trouble. Instead, they were the ones threatening them with their suffocating military might. And what was central to that war was our female protagonist Margaret of the House of Justice and Squale of the House of Lyosol. Squale silently approached Margaret, calling her name. Startled, she jumped and then ran towards him, engulfing him in a tight hug. He apologized and asked if she waited for a long time and explained it was not easy to get out. She told him she was only waiting for 4 hours, acting like it wasn't a big deal. And thanks to Marin, she could easily come out. She was quick to add she would do anything to meet him. He asked her what if on her way she gets eaten by a witch in the bordering words and he does not know about it. But she believed he would surely come to save her. He then asked her if she still liked The Little Mermaid. She replied, of course, it's such a romantic story. Margaret said the Little Mermaid met a love that was more precious than her life, just like she did. However, suddenly a shadow of sadness came over his face when she asked if there was a happy ending for them. When he remained quiet, she took it as a cue to ask another question. She asked what was going on this early hour. He reminded her as he was sure she knew what the situation is between North and South right now. She said, oh, the two sides are at war, right? He agreed and told her because of that he doesn't think they would be able to see each other again. Upon hearing this, she started panicking and vehemently expressing her reluctance, reminding him despite the struggle, they were still finding ways to meet each other. He then whispered, well, there is a way. Holding her hand, he brought it closer to his mouth and kissed the knuckles, declaring if only Margaret would hold his hand. After his tender touch, she was so out of it that she gave him her trust and held his hand. Suddenly, his whole demeanor changed as he ordered for his men to come and untie her up. All of a sudden, two men approached and held her back as she struggled. Confused and frightened, she pleaded, who are they? Turning to her lover, she urgently questioned, who are these people? What is going on? The last thing she could remember before being pushed into the water was Squale telling her to not ever forgive her. Under the water, a woman's voice approached her stating the obvious that now she must be regretting it. The voice pitied her, telling her she was such a poor child and she would give her a chance to live again. Margaret wondered why the person was telling her this. She could not figure out why she was saying that. The voice replied, it could be simple interest, entertainment, or trading. Well, whatever the reason was, the person liked it and did not care why. The woman came closer, probably a witch, and whispered in her ear, whether this opportunity will be her blessing or a curse, it will all be up to her. So this is how her second story started. Struggling against the dangerous waters in the pouring rain, she finally managed to reach the shore and collapsed, sitting as tears streamed down her face, her heart shattered. She could not hear anything, the sound of footsteps coming to rescue her or the calling of her name. The truth made her become colder. As she attempted to recollect the earlier events, she recalled she was forced to consume poison before she was pushed off the cliff. However, not only did she manage to survive, when she saw her face in the water, she realized she was in a different body. She remembered the voice of that woman, and remembered her words that whether this opportunity will be her blessing or curse, it will be all up to her. She realizes this opportunity is that she has changed into a completely different person. She wonders what else is there for her at this rate. She escaped from her house, from the watchful eyes, and crossed the borders. She wanted to see her lover that match, however. Suddenly, she snaps out of it when her throat starts hurting very much. She still feels the pain from that time. The inside of her throat hurts and burns, and her body is starting to feel feverish. She loses her footing and tumbles to the ground. Crying her eyes out, she wonders why does she have to suffer like this? She thinks if that person intended to give her an opportunity, she should have turned time. What is she supposed to do now? Margaret did not want her fate to be like this. She recalls her words from earlier, how she claimed the little mermaid met a love that is more precious than her life, just like she did. And now she thinks about it. Was it really more precious than her life? She asks herself. Was it really a romantic story? But no, it's a cruel story about someone who dies by the hands of someone she loves. Her throat and knees hurt. She is feeling so cold. She feels like she's going to die. She wants to go back and wonders what will happen to her now. Is there anyone who can save her? She doesn't care who it is, but just hopes there is. She then notices the rain has stopped. She doesn't know why that scene from their story comes into her mind. The scenery that the little mermaid saw before her death. The sun rises up as it warmly and softly shines on the foams of the cold ocean waves. Looking out at the view, tears streaming down her cheeks, she suddenly loses consciousness, overwhelmed by exhaustion, and believes she's simply too tired right now. A man draped in a cloak holding a lamp emerges into view, gazes at her, and wonders aloud, "What is this?" Later she is disturbed by some sound and tries to recognize it. It's the sound of someone mixing herbs. Suddenly, her eyes snap open as she jolts upright in her bed. The man who rescued her asks if she is awake. He smiles, commenting that he's impressed she's alive. She freaks out thinking, who is this, and looks around at the dirty place and recognizes it as a storage. The fear of spiders and ghosts overwhelms her as she thinks he laid her down in such a place. Suddenly, she feels worse when she realizes she cannot talk. She lost her voice. The man reminds her she was lying on the beach. He thought she was a corpse, so he thought it must be his unlucky day. He informs her this is his house in Ventily village, so she can say he picked her up while she was dying. After thinking hard, she recalls this is a tiny village right on the border between the north and the south. She heard that the people of this village are rough, so there's a lot of turmoil here. A person must pass through this village in order to cross the borders, and people would cross this place with a lot of fear. She even heard rumors that a witch lives here. A witch who likes to kidnap people and force them to eat poison, or she makes tea out of them. She looks at him with fear in her gaze, wondering if he's one of them. She thinks hard about whether she was kidnapped or not. Or is she in a dangerous situation? So lost in her thoughts, the man has to approach her and wave his hand in front of her to capture her attention. Then he asks, is she even listening to him? She decides she must run away, but to where? When he raises his hand, she flinches, the memory of her lover's similar gesture intended to harm her, flooding back. She wants to scream for someone to save her. He notices her pained expressions and leans in closer. He states, "It looks like she still has a fever, no wonder she's not talking." He further adds her treatment is not over, so she should rest. This catches her attention. She then feels the bandage around her neck and realizes it's true. She wonders maybe he's not a bad person. And if he's not bad, then maybe she can use him. She holds his hand and tries to write whatever she wants to ask. She decides first she wants to ask who he is. She should know his name. He sighs while apologizing. He explains he cannot read. Her mouth falls open in disbelief as she thinks he cannot read. What does he mean? He shrugs and says it's not that he cannot treat it completely. He reads a few words, but that doesn't mean he can understand the full sentence. And rather, there are not many people in this town who can read. He observes she must be from a pretty rich place, huh? She shakes her head. He thinks, what does she mean by no? She is a terrible liar. He then looks at her carefully, hairs without split ends. Pale and soft face. She also does not have any calluses on her hands. He thinks she must be a rich, aristocratic lady. But if there's anything that makes him worried, it was that her whole body was soaked, and she was barefoot, and she had a scar on her neck. He has treated her for now. He then mumbles, is her throat damaged? Suddenly, the memory from his childhood floods back in his mind. His friend had come running to him, informing him the nobles came from the north and got into a fight. As a result, he lost his mother. Suddenly, he narrows his eyes, his relaxed demeanor shifted. He tells himself no, he does not care about some noble problem. He tells herself now that she's awake, she should leave now. And it sounds like she has immaturely run away from her home. But this is not a place for someone who's lived an easy life like her. He asks her, has she ever slept in such a shabby place? Sarcastically, he adds that he has a poor Manhwa. He tells her before she can blame that her illness got worse because of her, she should leave. She thinks, what kind of rude person is this? She doesn't want to stay in a dirty place like this either. She thinks he was the one who brought her here without her consent, so why suddenly show inhospitality? She is mad at him for judging her and concluding that she immaturely ran away from home. What does he know about her? He doesn't know anything. Suddenly she gets off his bed and decides fine, she's leaving. She doesn't have to be here and receive his rude treatment. She stomps her foot as she leaves the house, convinced that this decision is for the better. However, she looks back and shoots him a glare before leaving. He wonders what the glare is for. He shrugs it off, thinking, how very energetic. Now that she's out, she thinks she did leave, but where should she go? When he comes out, she's still sitting at his entrance, her cheeks are red. When he tries to ask something, she hides under the white blanket lying there. He looks at the sky, and it's midnight. Irritated, he rubs his face. He gives her a bucket and a broom and instructs her to take it. Clueless, she looks at him. He clarifies he does not know her situation, but it sounds like she doesn't want to go home, so she's not going to stay here and eat shamelessly. Is she? He tells her those who do not work do not get to eat. He points a finger at her, letting her know he will come and inspect this place later, so she should clean it properly. She thinks, how could this person be so cruel? She is a patient. If only her voice could come out. Of course, she has never done this before. She recalls his words that this is not a place for someone who has lived an easy life such as herself. She takes his question into consideration that has she ever slept in a shabby place. She thinks everyone can clean, so isn't like she cannot clean either. She's going to wipe it with a mop anyway, but decides to pass on the broom. She thinks about her maid Marin, and she used to say that she would clean with lye. First, she mixes the ashes in the bucket, and then happily pour it on the floor. She decides cleaning the floor is complete, and it's water left now, so it will dry on its own. She thinks to herself that she must be a cleaning genius, as she deludes herself into thinking she did it so efficiently. But then she tells her to focus on her work. Genius or not, she better finish this in a hurry. God knows what she does all this time. But she does something though, and then her cleaning is done. She wonders if this is supposed to be this way. She raises her fists in the air, deciding she will pat herself on the back for finishing it perfectly, and calls herself a genius. Suddenly, she feels a headache. She knows it got worse because she was outside for a long time because of him. Thinking she must rest, her foot slips on the slippery floor, causing her to fall backwards and hit the shelf with her back. However, her mood worsens as she realizes that the books have fallen from the shelf and are scattered everywhere, along with the papers. Panicking, she wonders what should she do. She just finished cleaning. She has to clean up before he comes back. As she picks up a paper, she thinks, why is there a loose paper? Because she remembers, he said he cannot read, so why? When her gaze falls on the paper, she realizes this is an article about the witch. It says the witch is dead, and it signals to them that the era of peace has arrived. They have shed too much blood and lost too much. This is the story of a hero who stopped the war and saved the country, and a witch who almost destroyed the country. 7 years ago, the witch who turned the north into a sea of fire was Margaret Justice. 7 years ago, the witch turned the north into a sea of fire, Margaret Justice. Margaret wonders, what is this? Jack steps into the room, questioning what is all that clatter. He becomes shocked as he asks her what happened, and questions if she is out of her mind. He asks what kind of cleaning is that as she trembles. He nervously questions if something happened. He notices the article on her hand. He asks her that is an article about the witch Margaret, is not it? He questions if she is interested in witches. She does not respond as he tells her if that is a mistake, then it is okay. He asks her if she knows what the article says. He tells her he bought it because he heard it was about the witch, realizes he cannot read it at all. He continues as he states that his mother worked alone as a pharmacist. She died because she was accused of being a witch. He states that is a common story in the rural area. He continues as he tells her even though she left him so many books, he cannot read them. He looks at her as he mentions if it is her, she can read it, right? He notices her expression, which is filled with anxiousness, as he asks her what does it say. He wonders what does it say that makes her have that kind of expression. Her eyes are filled with fear as she wonders what does it say in there. This is a story of what happened after her death. She was the one who burned the North. The world's hatred was focused entirely on her, and the war ended when she, the calamity, died. And Mr. Squall that killed her became a hero. She sweats as she wonders what is this. Her hand trembles as tears form up in her eyes, questioning if she died just because of this. Jack stares at her as he wonders why isn't she saying anything. He notices bandage around her neck as he wonders if she can't talk. He asks her to take this drink, mentioning that her throat will feel better. She continues to think that she already knew this, that everyone from the outside is like this. They all were laughing and chattering earlier with her, and yet she finds it really foolish. Still, she thought Squall was different. She only believed in him. He wasn't a hero, but just a butcher. She knows moreover it has been 7 years, causing her to wonder how quickly time has passed. As well as she thinks how much should she believe this article. She knows her head hurts so much. Right then Jack calls out to her. He asks her if she's not listening to him when he tells her to drink this. Her face turns all red and she's all sweaty. He mentions that it looks like it hurts a lot, so she should drink it quickly. This is a medicine that he made, and he mentions that it is good for the throat and it might be better. She looks at him and her mind thinks of Squall. He mentions that she should hurry and drink. This causes her to push him away as he mistakenly loses the grip. The medicine falls down from his hands. His eyes widen in surprise. Swear streams down her face as she loses herself in the memories of her killer. She suddenly realizes that she threw the medicine as she knows she did not mean to do that. She grabs onto him as she ponders that she needs to apologize. Her health worsens as she suddenly passes out, noticing that her voice is going. A man had told her that a precious person had arrived as he greeted her, mentioning that it had been a long time since they had last met. He had mentioned that he heard she did not often set foot in a place like that, so it had been a great blessing to have her there. She had nervously agreed as she had pondered that it was too loud there. He had stated that he heard she had very sensitive ears. She had pondered that if he was aware of it, then he should be quiet. He had mentioned that he knew a very good place, and it was their mention, so he had asked her how about they go and enjoy a quiet tea party with his son. She couldn't take it anymore as she had realized it was really so noisy, and that was why she had not wanted to come. She had wondered why her mother had told her to take off her earplugs. Her mother had told her that it was not polite and it would be better to take them off. She had covered her ears with her hands as she had realized that she could not do anything because her head was pounding. It had started again as people had begun to talk about her. They had mentioned that Miss Market was blocking the conversation. They had joked about her as one had mentioned that they should leave her alone because she was too precious to hear their chatter. So, what could they do about it? Perhaps all that talk about her having sensitive hearing could have been just a lie. She had known that she could still hear it all and had found it really rude. She had stepped forward as she had decided to leave, realizing that she should just leave and go somewhere else. People had still talked about her, mentioning that it had failed and they had thought they could finish her this time. They had also mentioned that it had been better to give it up as whenever someone had opened his mouth, she had closed her ears and had wondered how everyday life was possible for someone like her. She had wondered why she should like to hear such vulgar talk. It had not been like she had hated all sounds. If it had been a clear and pure sound, if it had been a beautiful sound, then she too could have heard it as right. Then she had noticed the sound of a piano and had realized just like that sound. Her eyes had set on the person who had been playing the piano. She had pondered that that person was surely Mr. de Squall of the Liasty family. She had told him that his performance was amazing as he had thanked her. She had mentioned that it had been an unremarkable performance, and he had just been playing with one hand. She had stated that it had not been important at all, though mentioning that it had not changed the fact that his performance had been beautiful. She had smiled brightly as he had stared at her. That had been her first time meeting with Squall. She had believed that he had been the fate fallen from the heaven. She had wondered, but how had it turned out to be like that? As he had asked her to please never ever forgive him. Back in the present, she screams as Jack becomes worried and asks her if she's okay. He asks her to pull herself together as she takes out her bandage from the neck, causing it to bleed. He realizes that her condition is more serious than he thought, and he needs to give her this medicine quickly as he tries to feed her the medicine. She covers her mouth as she wonders why on earth is she refusing the medicine. She ponders at this rate before she turns to extend her hand towards him. She asks him to save her. Looking at her condition, he takes out the medicine as he drinks it. Right then he holds her hand. There is no such thing as faith in this world, so she swears that she will never love again. He kisses her so she can drink the medicine. The new day begins as Margaret wakes up. She realizes that she feels really refreshed and her throat no longer hurts her. Even her head is better. She wonders if it is because she grew a lot. She tries to speak as she realizes that. As for her voice, it still does not work. She tries to assure herself that there is still hope. She notices Jake right beside her as she wonders why is he here. He's slightly opened his eyes as he mentions that he sees he has improved, but it is strange that she has not completely recovered. She wonders if he slept there all night long. She looks towards the side and notices water and a towel. She finds it unbelievable that she took care of her all night. He yawns as he's really sleepy. She realizes that she feels somewhat guilty. He looks at her as he mentions that she must be thinking strange things again. He asks us if by any chance she remembers what happened last time. She is confused as he states if she does not remember, then it does not matter. His attention turns towards her clothes as he asks her to first get upright, then her stomach growls. He states that they should eat first as she feels embarrassed. He gives her a potato as she wonders if this is a meal. He asks her if it is not eating. He tells her this is her food as she ponders that cannot be true. He also states that if she does not like it, then she can leave. She knows that there's nothing else. As he ponders, he does not think she wants to do that again. He states that he is telling her that she should not dream of eating meat and even potatoes. They are considered a luxury here. He mentioned that he still does not know why she was lying there, but he has no intention of making this place suitable for her. He tells her if she understands that before she picks and begins to eat it. He asks her if she thinks that she can do it. He also reminds her what she has to remove the peel first. She spreads it all out as he ponders that he thought she would not eat because it would hurt her pride. But it seems like she is not completely foolish. In other words, he states that he can only keep offering this much, so he's proposing a contract to her. Like he said, he wants to read the books his mother left him. But few people in this village can only read. And she needs a place to live as well as someone to treat her throat right. He states that he did so what would teach him how to write. And she will be the one to teaching him how to write while he will help her until her throat heals. He asks her what does she think of this, mentioning that it is not a bad suggestion, and he's sure of that. She also thinks that it is not a bad idea, and she honestly does not know what she would do if she is left here. She thinks that it might be safe to stay here and recover, but she does not like what it seems as if she's going along with this person's idea. She nods as he mentions now should they have a deal. They handshake as she ponders that it feels like she has been trapped. As they are done, he calls out to her, stating that he would at least like to know her name. But there's a problem. As he wonders, how are they supposed to communicate? She cannot speak, and he cannot write. He decides to call her by her nickname. He thinks of a nickname as he asks her. How about Hindong, since she is white? She doesn't really like it as he mentions that he feels like she is cursing him with her eyes, stating that he was just kidding. He thinks that he seems to have no sense in naming, so he thinks about the girls that he has met so far: Michelle, Marie, Josephine, Lily. Something like that. What he's not finding the one he likes. After thinking for a while, he asks her what about Mag. She remembers that thinking about it, people would sometimes call her that. She knows it has worked well in the past and thinks maybe that person will come to kill her if he finds out that she's alive. He tells her that it's convenient and he liked it quite a lot. Questioning what about her. She also seems okay with it as he decides to go with Meg and mentions he looks forward to working with her. He introduces himself as Jake Rowland. He mentions that he is the only pharmacist in the village. She thinks about it as she notices. It's a different environment, different people, and a different name, she wonders. Could she really call that person her? She knows as long as the president alive, she would be Margaret. Antique can change her name as he likes, as she's just a passerby anyway. Right then someone knocks on the door questioning if the pharmacist is inside. He shouts that there's a problem and asks Jake to come quickly, mentioning that the villages are in need of help as both of them stare at the door anxiously. Jack and Margaret are terrified as they wonder what is all this. A couple of people are injured. He asks what actually happened, questioning if it was the Northerners again. He is told that they were cutting down trees when they tried to stop them. They still have such old customs and questions. What could they do in the first place? The Northerners have all the weapons and soldiers, and they are completely helpless. He decided to check out the injured first and questions who is in the most critical condition. She tells him she will show it to him before she grabs his hands and asks him to come here. She asks about Margaret and asks him why did he bring her all the way here. He responds that she is just an acquaintance of his, and it seems like she wanted to follow him here. Margaret wonders, of course, why should she be in that dirty house all alone? The woman's questions what does he mean by that, as she reminds him that he is aware outsiders are forbidden in this village. He tells her that he will take care of it himself since it is his business, and right now he is in a hurry, so he will start the treatment. He leaves to check on the injured first before the woman mentions he brought her here. The woman seemed pretty frustrated because of it before another man tells her that treating the patients come first. He also reminds her that Jack's mother Lily was an outsider too, if she remembers. She remembers it as. She looks at Margaret. Margaret wonders what are they looking at? She wonders what is wrong with her being an outsider. Right then, Czech calls out to Margaret and asks her to come here and help him. As she goes to him, he asks her why she's so slow. He tells her to not just stand around there, but bring him a piece of clean cloth and also boil a lot of water and drink it. She wonders why should she do that. He notices all the blood and people as she finds it really disgusting. She wonders if this is all blood. And then thinks, what did he say? What does he want her to bring? He right then shouts at her and repeats that she should hurry and bring the water and cloth. She seems pretty overwhelmed before she runs away, mentioning that she'll bring them. As she's running, she bumps into someone. She is going crazy because she cannot talk and wonders how can she express cloth. She points at her cloth as she tries to tell him to give her the cloth. He asks her who is she and mentions that he is pretty busy, so she should say later. She still asks him to give her the cloth. She does not know how to say it before she shows them her clothes in different ways. The person seems pretty confused as she realizes that he could not understand her at all. She is losing her mind because of it as she runs away, realizing this is not doing anything, and she will at least boil the water first. The man calls out to her questioning. But who is she? She does not know how to start a fire at all. She finds it impossible as she realizes that she is in trouble and wonders why did not the fire started when she put in wood. She then thinks that did note the contract stipulate that she was only going to teach him to write, wondering why is she doing this now. She knows that this was not written in her book. She feels really exhausted as she realizes she cannot even ask someone to do it. She looks at the sky as she finds it weird and wonders if she has always been this helpless. She knows there was always a fire burning in her room. She's aware that she still has to do this though. She imagines him taunting her that she cannot even boil water as she thinks that she is sure he would say something rude like that. She knows there are still a few embers. She completely gets covered in smoke before she looks up and finds a woman. The woman asks her if she can help her. Margaret wonders who the woman is,